I'm going to turn it over to Belinda. We're delighted to have you here. Will you introduce Ellie and Victoria, please?
Yeah, hi everybody, and I'm sorry to have been running late. I was tied up with a court thing. And just to buy myself another minute or so to catch my breath and make my mental transition, I'm going to ask for Ellie and Victoria to introduce themselves and say anything that they would like to say to the group. And then I'll have a few questions for them. And of course, we'll open it up for all of you to ask questions, to get through as many as we can. And please feel free to put things in the chat if you prefer to do that. So why don't we start with Mr. Prosecutor Eli Savit.
All right. Well, it's great to be here with everybody today. And even though you didn't ask me to answer the question, I'm going to go ahead and answer it because unlike, for example, Ed Dance, who by the way was our deputy campaign manager and was our outreach coordinator during the transition, I wouldn't even put myself at a 10. And the reason for that is because we are constantly in the process of reimagining and learning what the prosecutors can do differently. For so long, the truth of the matter is that prosecutors have taken a single type of approach to justice. It was one that was rooted in largely having a punishment-first approach. It is the philosophy that, quite frankly, has fueled a great deal of racial and socioeconomic inequity in our community. It's led, of course, to mass incarceration. And when I ran for this office, I of course talked about turning the page on that era of prosecution and moving more towards a restorative, rehabilitative approach. And the truth of the matter is that the core of what we do here in the office is chugging along. We're still prosecuting serious offenses, still holding people accountable, still making sure that we're prioritizing community safety. But there is just so much that we are doing to reimagine our criminal legal system, to move in that restorative and rehabilitative direction. And we're constantly building partnerships and building alliances to where we can address harm, not through the criminal legal system, but outside of the criminal legal system in a way that both promotes equity, promotes justice, and ultimately promotes long-term public safety. So we are always learning here in the prosecutor's office about what is possible, and we're learning from community partners that we have on the ground in Washtenaw County, because transforming the legal system and frankly transforming how we address harm in our community is something that takes all of us. The prosecutor is an important partner in this work, but it is hardly the only actor, and that's the spirit that we bring to our jobs of prosecution. And speaking of partners, I will turn it over now to Victoria, who I used to go on things and I'd call her my partner in crime, and people told me, you are a prosecutor, you need to stop using that phrase. So now I call her my partner in justice. I could not ask for a better friend or partner in this work, and we're also lucky to have her in Washtenaw County. And I'll turn it over to you, Victoria.
Thanks so much, Ellie. Good afternoon to all of you, or good morning. Actually, it's not quite afternoon. I love it too, Jermaine, and I love Ellie. Let me just have this little love fest about Ellie. I came to Washtenaw County from Wayne County. I ran a very similar progressive prosecutor race in Wayne County during the same time that Ellie was running here in Washtenaw. We became acquainted, became friends, because we believe in the same issues. We believe that we can create safer and more just communities without taking this tough on crime, punitive approach as prosecutors. We believe that we can love on the people in our communities that harm people, and we believe that we can ultimately transform our communities through love and through restorative justice and restorative practices, and ultimately not sending people to cages, to jails and prisons where they do not receive rehabilitation. In fact, Ellie and I know that the same drivers for violence that are present in communities that have been studied, isolation, when you look at poverty, when you look at the separation of races, as Ellie spoke about, all of that is also present in our jails and prisons. So if you think about what we're doing, it just really makes no sense, and we should stop. It makes no sense to take people out of an environment in the community that is contributing to them making bad choices and harming people, and then putting them in another environment that is the exact same and expecting for them to come out on the back end somehow rehabilitated and improved. That is just insane. It's actually the definition of insanity, right? Doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting a different outcome. And so Ellie and I, we teamed up after the primary race in our respective counties, and he said, why don't you come on out to Washtenaw County and help me run my office here? And I could not have been more happy. I always tell people that not only are we partners in justice, but Ellie is like a brother from another mother for me. We work very closely every day because we believe in what we do. It sets my soul on fire to sit next to this man and to really fight for equity in our criminal legal system while also pursuing safety and justice. And so, I could not be more happy to be here with all of you because I absolutely love what Belinda and Jermaine are doing at the DRC. We have partnered with them to build out a restorative justice program here in the county. This is why we're here. This is why Ellie and I said we want to be prosecutors. And let me just say, we did not raise our hands to do this because we did not really understand all that prosecutors were able to do, because traditionally prosecutors, like Ellie said, used the power punitively. And so this is a new concept, progressive prosecution, to use the power for good, to really use the power to get to the root causes of why people commit harm, so that we can break that cycle and not just try to put a Band-Aid on it and we end up exacerbating the problem. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Belinda to kick us off.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I just want to acknowledge that Jermaine and I have been at the table with both Ellie and Victoria and other members of their team and members of the community on a couple different work groups. But I also want to acknowledge that there are other staff of the DRC on this Zoom as well: Sally Brush, Carolyn Stillwell, who actually coordinates the DL cases, the diversion cases that are currently happening, and Stephanie may be here too. And then many of the people on the screen are volunteers, have been long-term supporters. So this is a mighty group that stands with the DRC to make sure we can get this work done. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I think this is a great segue. We've been hearing a different narrative already in the larger community because of your approach and your goals and your vision for a different kind of prosecutor's office. And I thought it might be helpful for all of us to understand some of the roles that occupy the prosecutor's office. For the first time in my life, I've had more, in my history at the DRC, I've had more opportunities to hear and to speak to a victim's advocate. Had never done that before. So people have asked me, well, what do victims advocates do? And I said, I really don't know, but they seem to be very nice people. And so I thought we could use this opportunity just to define the various roles that might be more present in the community because you're doing things so differently. So if you can give definition to the role of the prosecutor, that of your chief assistant. We know that there are other assistant prosecutors and the victims advocates and maybe other people in the office that might be more visible to the general public simply because you're doing things more differently. And I don't know who wants to take that one. Is it Ellie or
Sure.
However you want to do that?
I'll give it a shot here. And you're right, because not only are we trying to be more connected to the community, more visible in the community, more of a partner in the community, we've also actually added a number new units and new positions in the prosecutor's office over the past several months, many of whom will be interacting closely with the community. So Victoria, I'm trying to do our org chart from memory, and Victoria keeps it updated. So if I miss anything, let me know. But so of course I'm the elected prosecutor, and the prosecutor's job generally is in the criminal system. Prosecutors make the decision whether to charge somebody with a crime, with what to charge somebody, whether somebody has an opportunity to go down a rehabilitative path instead of jail or prison, or whether the standard path we've been using for a long time is going to be pursued. Once charges are brought, the prosecutor is responsible ultimately for litigating the case against a defendant. So you've got defense lawyers on the other side, you got the prosecutor on our side, and we all think of the criminal legal system as playing out in front of a judge and a jury, and of course that happens in some cases. But the truth of the matter is only over 90% of cases are resolved through plea bargains, through a deal between the prosecution and the defense. That's not just true in Washtenaw County, that's true across the board in any prosecution system in the United States of America. So in a real sense, in those cases, the prosecutor served not just as the prosecutor who decided to bring charges, but also functionally in many cases as the judge and the jury, because of course a judge has to sign off on these plea bargains, but if and the defense agree, then it's very infrequent that a judge will have concerns about it. So it is a position which takes a ton of discretion by prosecutors, discretion both to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to keep the community safe, that we're being rehabilitative, that we're not being unfair, that we're promoting equity, and we're not treating people differently because of who they are. So that's the general job of the prosecutor, charging through plea bargaining, through in some cases trial, and the day-to-day work. I oversee the office. I set policies. We Victoria and I supervise the office together and keep an eye on things. But the truth of the matter is, the day-to-day work of prosecution is largely carried out in court by assistant prosecutors. So of course, Victoria is our chief assistant prosecutor. She is my partner in everything we do. Everything that you see coming from our office, Victoria and I basically work on together. She is the person that our direct supervisors report to. And so she does just a fantastic job managing the office and making sure that everything's getting done. Under her, we have supervising first assistant attorneys, and those are the ones that are supervising the attorneys who are in court every day. We've got supervisors in charge of the district court, which is where misdemeanors go, as well as our supervisor in charge of district courts is also in charge of generally the charging decisions that our office makes. Then we have one in charge of the circuit court and general trials, and that's where felony matters go, and he oversees all of those all those attorneys that are assigned to those units. We have a special victims unit that deals with cases of criminal sexual conduct and child abuse and the like. We've got a first assistant prosecutor over that. We've also got an appeals unit where if something happens in the trial court, you can go up on appeal to the appellate court and ultimately to the Michigan Supreme Court, or in a very rare case, though I don't think it's ever happened out of Washtenaw, the United States Supreme Court, and they handle all of that at the appeals level. And then there's various assistant prosecutors who do the day-to-day work under the direction of those first assistant attorneys and Victoria and myself, ultimately Victoria and myself. We also have special prosecutors for domestic violence cases. We have a special prosecutor who's just charged with domestic violence cases because that's a very specialized subject that needs to be acted quickly on and with real subject matter expertise. So that's a special prosecutor. And then we have the victims advocates. And the victims advocates are, when the prosecutors stand up and we represent the people of the state of Michigan. We're not the victims' lawyers, we're not the police's lawyers. Our job is to make an independent determination that we think is in the best interest of the people of the state of Michigan as a whole. And ultimately, the power does reside in the people because this is an elected position. That said, the victim's voice is very important to us in the process. And so the victims advocates are specially trained individuals who are the liaison to crime victims, who keep them updated on the case, who consult with them as to the direction that we're thinking about, who get their input, who are really on the front lines with the victims if they, at every stage in the case, walk them through the process if they need to go in and testify, talk to them about what they might want to see as a disposition. And we've got a great victims advocate team here led by Brenda Quiet, who's just a fantastic victims' right advocate that oversees them, and Belinda and Jermaine are getting to know her well too. Then we have a variety of legal assistants who are invaluable. Everybody who's ever run an office knows that the assistants are really the ones that make everything run. If you call the office and the phone is being answered, that's one of our great legal assistants, right? They're responsible for directing inquiries to the right attorney or the right victims advocate, or sometimes up to Victoria and myself, and they just make everything run smoothly in the office. And we've got a fantastic supervisor, an office manager, in Carrie Dorr, who's just wonderful. And then though you may have gotten more than you bargained for here, there's several new positions that we've created in the office. One that I'm really excited about is for the first time in Washtenaw County, assuming it is fully funded by the county commission this spring permanently, is we are going to have a conviction, integrity, and expungement unit. And this is a unit that will go back, and when there are claims of innocence in a case where we obtained a conviction, this unit will go back and actually investigate and see if we got it wrong. And if we got it wrong, we will take immediate action to redress that, because there is no worse mistake that the government can make than depriving somebody of their liberty when they didn't do the act that they were convicted of. So that's one aspect of this. And the other aspect is expungement. Next week on April 11th, Michigan's new law is going to kick in, which dramatically expands the ability of folks to expunge old criminal records. And we are going to be at the front lines in actually helping people that are eligible get those old criminal records off of their record. Now, that may seem like an odd thing for the prosecutor's office to do, but under the statute, you're eligible for expungement if you've done everything right? If you stayed out of trouble for a certain number of years, and our position is you should be able to have that record expunged. If you've done everything we've asked you for, why do you still have a criminal record that can hold you back from getting jobs, from obtaining housing, from continuing your education? And so not only are we going to be supportive of this, we're going to be actively helping people expunge their old criminal records. And that's falling within the scope of this new conviction, integrity, and expungement unit, which I just got to say, we've got a phenomenal person heading that. Her name is Frances Walters. She actually was the legal director of the entire Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project before doing this. She's got 12 exonerations under her belt, in which she led the teams that discovered that wrongful convictions had been obtained and got folks exonerated. She's from Washtenaw County, grew up in Ann Arbor, and she decided, I want to come back. I want to build this unit up. So we're just thrilled to have her in place there. Then we have in a partnership with the Sheriff's Office and Community Mental Health. At the end of this month, we're going to be bringing in a lead prosecutor, which is an acronym. It's Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion and Deflection. And the idea here is, instead of bringing charges against people, we're going to be working with the Sheriff's Office of Community Mental Health to connect them with resources. We'll never file the charge in the first place. All we'll ask them to do, if they're dealing with a behavioral health, mental health, substance use issue, and they don't pose an imminent danger to the community, we'll say, look, get help, get connected to resources. And if you do that, we will never bring the charge in the first place. So she's in charge of that and in charge of tracking the progress of folks who are in that program. I'm really excited about it. It's worked wonders elsewhere. And, when we talk about rehabilitation over incarceration, this is exactly what we're talking about. The lead prosecutor is going to be Allison Robbins, who just comes with a wealth of experience and is going to be phenomenal in the role. You see, I like bragging on the folks in our office because we've just got a fantastic team here. And then the final thing that we just announced last week is we were actually one of 8 jurisdictions across the country selected for the Public Rights Project Fellowship. And we are going to have a specialized attorney sitting in our office who's going to help us stand up an economic crimes unit. We often talk about, as prosecutors, the harm that arises from street crime and violence and sexual assault, and that is real harm. But there is also significant harm that is being done by predatory corporations, by folks who engage in wage theft, folks who maintain unsafe working conditions for their workers, folks who are engaged in labor trafficking, and folks who engage in consumer scams. So for the first time, we are going to have a specialized unit that is just dedicated to combating that type of abuse and that type of harm. We do not have that position filled yet. It starts on September 15th. So if you know anybody who would be a lawyer with at least 3 to 5 years of experience that is interested in joining this team, have them apply at the Public Rights Project website. Victoria, how did I do in our org chart from memory?
Perfect.
All right, awesome.
I did not know that all of that was going on at 200 North Main, but that's awesome to hear. And thank you for clarifying that, because a lot of this, a lot that we try to accomplish in our brown bag is just having an opportunity to be educated about things that are not as familiar to us. So that was truly incredible to hear. You talked about a couple of things that are happening differently in your office. And there's a question in the chat, and Harvey, I'll get to that as well. In your first 90 plus days or so, you have been doing a lot. I think for the first couple of weeks, it seems like every other day I was reading or seeing something on my television screen, Eli Savit once again being interviewed by the media or an article in MLive. You've touched on a couple things, the integrity unit, lead, expungement, in this public rights or the economic, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to say that correctly. What other initiatives are you, have you started in your office? I know there's been discussion around cash bail. I bumped into I don't want to say too much, but I bumped into a probation officer who said, this prosecutor is not locking up juveniles, so I gotta work my case differently. I don't know if it was, it's like, for me, it was like, stay safe, wear your mask, and I walked away because you said you were going to do those things in a campaign, and I believed you. But what other things are you doing or have you initiated in these first few months of taking office?
Victoria, you want to handle that one? I talked for a while with respect to the last one. My throat's sore.
Absolutely. So we, as Eli has stated, and as you know, Belinda, we are doing quite a bit. We've already done a lot, and we even have more things on deck ready to go. Let's talk about cash bail. It was the second policy that we issued when we came into office on the 1st of January. We issued a policy that's one of my favorites and will always be one of my favorites. And it was to give our APAs, our assistant prosecuting attorneys, more discretion in the courtroom. We do not believe that, this idea that one size fits all justice is justice. In fact, it is not. And every case needs to be viewed and treated differently. Every defendant, every victim of a crime. And the very next thing that we did after that policy was to issue the very first policy of its kind in the state of Michigan. And that is that our office, our prosecutors, will not seek cash bail on any case. And to date, into April, we have not sought cash bail on any one of our cases. Now, you may wonder what that means. And you may also wonder if that also means that we are opening up the doors of the jail and just sending everyone home. No, that is not the case. But what we do know is that cash bail is a very archaic system of attacking people who live in poverty and also people of color who are being locked up pre-trial after they've been charged with a crime, but they have not been found guilty, they have not pled guilty. And because there's no conviction, they are still presumed to be innocent. That's a right that they have. And when you hold people pre-trial in a jail and you put a price tag on them and say, you pay this amount or else you stay in jail until your case is tried or until you plead guilty, that is really wrong. And it's not only harmful to defendants, but it's harmful to their families, and it's also harmful to the community. Because if you flip it on the reverse and say, well, you've been charged with a very serious crime and your cash bond is $200,000. Well, if they have the money to pay that, that person gets back out and they're free to continue harming our society as they once did. And so when you look at the fairness of cash bail, you immediately come to the place where you realize it's not fair. And there's no correlation between the amount of money one has in their pocket and their likelihood of returning to court or the likelihood that they will not commit new offenses. And those are the two ideas or concepts that folks for ages have held on to. Well, we need cash bail and we need to set high cash bails to get folks invested, right? To get them to realize the serious nature of the offense, to want to come to court and continue to come back and participate in this process, and also to not commit new crimes. Well, the research has been done. We had Pew Charitable Trust out of DC. They spent some time with our joint task force that the governor convened a few years ago on pretrial release. And they shared the data after studying our county jails across the state. And what they found was that 87% of people who didn't pay any money, they returned to court. 89% of folks who were released pre-trial and didn't pay any money, they did not commit new offenses. So again, there was no correlation between the amount of money one had in their pocket and the likelihood that they wouldn't offend and would return to court. So, you know, I'm a firm believer in the saying that our mothers and grandmothers told us, when you know better, you do better. So we now know that cash bail was ineffective in keeping us safe. We now know that cash bail actually targets and harms the most marginalized people in our community, and that there's another way to do it. And so what Ellie and I have done, and this is really Ellie's vision, we have said, instead of seeking cash bail, we're going to ask the court to impose non-monetary conditions that go directly to public safety. So if drugs are at the center of why someone committed harm, we're asking for drug testing. We're asking for alcohol testing. We're asking for GPS tethers. We're asking for someone, depending on the danger that we believe they pose to society, to be ordered to stay within their own home. And then there are some cases that we need to release someone to a responsible member of the community that can reasonably ensure community safety. But under no circumstances do we believe that putting a dollar amount on someone's freedom is appropriate or at all will speak to public safety. And I'm happy to entertain questions about our cash bail policy here because it is new. Again, it's the first of its kind in the state of Michigan, but I'm hopeful that it will serve as a model for other prosecutor offices across the state because it is working. You have not read about stories in MLive or any other publication that says, hey, this cash bail policy went into effect and all hell is broken loose. You know, there are harmful people on their streets and it's because Prosecutor Savit isn't asking for cash bail. You haven't read that because that's just not true and that's not what's happening. In fact, we are finding from folks in the courtroom and not just our prosecutors or folks on the bench, but defense attorneys saying that the policy is working. People are slowly coming around and understanding the policy, and that's what we wanted.
That's great. That's very great. And there are a couple questions in the chat that I will get to. I just wanted to, finish up the initiatives. Are there any other initiatives that you have rolled out that we have missed in this dialogue? There were so many. I just want to make sure we all have some understanding of them.
We have so
Okay,
we've got 13 that are up right now, ranging from immigration consequences to racial profiling to the war on drugs to juvenile charges. And then partnership with organizations like Fair Michigan around combating LGBTQ hate crimes, and we've got another one that I think will be rolling out relatively soon. So if you I realize we have limited time and people probably have specific questions which I'd love to talk about what people are interested in. But go to the prosecutor's website. One thing we firmly believe in is being transparent with the community, and everything we're doing and the rationale behind it is available for the public to see, for the public to read, and for the public to ask questions about.
And it's that on your website. I want to make sure. Okay.
Yep, just click policies, and you can see everything that we're doing.
Okay. Great. And the link to the website is in the chat. So thank you very much for that. I'm going to go to the comments in the chat from Harvey. How does the Conviction Integrity Unit decide which cases to review? How many cases do you expect to be reviewed during the course of a year, and out of how many total cases? A three-part question about your Conviction Integrity Unit.
So it's a great question, and as to the last one, I have no idea, because we've never had a Conviction Integrity Unit before. So without that opportunity for people to ask for a second look at their case, we just don't know how many people are going to do it. But anybody is going to be able to apply. Anybody that's had a conviction. The thing about a Conviction Integrity Unit is that they don't serve as a 13th juror, right? It's not in the business of going back and saying, well, if I was on the jury, I probably would have not have convicted. That's not the function of it. So in terms of the cases that will warrant more serious review, anybody can apply, but generally there needs to be some change in the evidence, which can be new evidence. If somebody confessed to a crime that somebody else was convicted of. It can be new DNA evidence, right? Advances in DNA technology can potentially exonerate people. It can be advances in how we understand forensic science. There's been a lot of convictions that have been obtained over the years from science that has since proved faulty. You can look at things like ballistics evidence, which for a long period of time was seen as sort of a gold standard. The idea that you could just say that a bullet was fired from a particular gun, just kind of not true. Right? You can rule it out, but you can't rule it in. Arson evidence is one thing that has really changed dramatically, and so there's convictions that were based on that may be amenable to review. Other things, and this comes as a surprise to a lot of people, but one of the biggest drivers of wrongful convictions is false confession. People often think, why would you confess to a crime if you didn't do it? And part of the reason is because of interrogation techniques that really are not geared at getting the truth out. So that's something too. We can see that this was a confession that was based on an interrogation technique that has been proven to be faulty, and has led to exonerations elsewhere. That can qualify as new evidence too. Of course, things like police misconduct or prosecutorial misconduct can also be reasons to review it. But that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at. And the great thing about having somebody heading this unit that is so accomplished in the innocence world is that not only does she know all of these various advances in science and research on wrongful conviction, but the unit is also going to help us moving forward to make sure that we're not relying on faulty expert testimony, to make sure that we're not bringing cases that may be based on a wrongful confession. And so that's a big part of the unit too. Ultimately, the goal is, in the long term, and I'm not sure when if ever this is going to happen, but to have the Conviction Integrity Unit be very bored, because they'll still get applications in, and people will say, I want review of my case, but just look through it and say, no, actually, the office did everything right. That should be the ideal that we're striving towards. And so we'll see how many exonerations we get. We've never had anything like this before in Washtenaw County. We'll see how many applications we get. Anybody's going to be eligible to seek review. We'll take a look at all of them, and we'll move forward with the cases where there's really additional evidence that looks like there's something to investigate.
Thank you. Thank you. Another question in the chat from Ruth. In response to the Philly DA documentary, I've heard Ellie say that they are now experiencing the difficulties of changing the culture. What were these difficulties coming from?
Sure, and since I'll jump in on that first, and Victoria, I think, will probably have something to add, but since I said it, I guess.
Okay.
You know, and I'll say this: if you look at progressive prosecutors across the country, they have varying degrees of difficulty implementing their vision. I will say that there is a group of progressive prosecutors, progressive elected prosecutors from across the country, and we do like get together virtually now and swap ideas and swap stories. And I have to say that quite candidly, we are the envy of a lot of our counterparts across the country, in part because the community has been really supportive. You know, here in Washtenaw County, we have a sheriff who has spearheaded the LEAD program and understands the need to take a more rehabilitative approach. And so, unlike in other areas of the country where an elected progressive prosecutor is in open war with the police chief or the sheriff, we're working at the table alongside them. These are programs that that we're pursuing together. And the other important thing is we really had an office that we inherited, and some folks retired after I won, but we largely inherited an office that was filled with people that were eager to do things differently and wanted the discretion to be able to pursue justice, but had been hamstrung by policies that have been maintained by the previous office. So all that is to say, it's gone quite well, especially as compared to other prosecutors elsewhere in the country. But culture change is always a challenge. And you know, one of the things that Victoria does such a great job of this. But one of the things, like for internally with our assistant prosecuting attorneys, they've been used to a system where there's zero tolerance policies, and they can only take the most punitive approach. And so there's been initially over these first few months, but now it's decreasing. There was a lot of hesitance. Like, can we really do this? Is this real? I want to do this in this case. Is this okay, or am I going to get in trouble with my bosses somehow? Because that was the system they grew up in. It's like the only answer is to be particularly punitive. So we've been working with that. We're on restorative justice, for example. One of the big things is changing the culture around what victims want. So frequently, prosecutors say, I'm going to act on behalf of the victims by trying to get the most punitive outcome possible. But the truth of the matter is, if you really talk to a lot of victims, that's not what they want. They just want to make sure that what happened to them isn't done again, and they want some acknowledgement of the harm that was caused by the person who committed harm, which is something that our legal system, our adversarial legal system, isn't set up to do. Because the minute that you do that, you're pleading guilty. If you take responsibility and acknowledge the harm you caused in an open court, you're pleading guilty, and you're going to be subject to punishment. So it's been a culture shift there too, to say, look, we're still working for victims. Victims still matter a great deal. That means listening to them. It means not just giving them the one-size-fits-all approach to justice, but actually hearing what they want more than anything. And again, I'll say this: Brenda Quiet is just fantastic at this because she understands this. But and I think that our victims advocates do too. But it is a shift in culture, particularly when you've been used to doing something one way day in and day out, and all of a sudden new leadership comes in and says, we're doing things entirely differently. But I couldn't ask for better assistant prosecutors here. And Victoria, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
So, I was going to emphasize what you said about the inner workings of our office. I firmly believe that our staff here had a burning desire to do what, we came in with the vision to do. They just didn't have, leadership that was encouraging them to do that and allowing them to do that. Because quite frankly, when we have staff meetings or when I speak one-on-one with folks, I start and work backward. I always say, what's the end goal here? What is it that will certainly keep our community safe? What will help break this cycle so that we don't have this person return to us? What will likely make the crime survivor or victim whole? And we work backward. And when we do that, I have an opportunity to see their thoughts out loud. And they have the right thinking. They want to do the right thing. But like Ellie said, they like tiptoe toward it and say like, but can I do that? I'm like, of course you can, because that's justice. Yes, you can do the right thing, even if that means that we're dismissing a case because it shouldn't have been brought. Or if we are deciding to not even bring charges because it's just simply not in the best interest of justice. So, we could not be more fortunate than we are with the staff that we have here. With our judges who are on the bench, they are excellent. We can get them on the phone, ask to have a meeting with them over Zoom at moment's notice. And it's not just to ask questions or to share our concerns, but we share ideas and we propose programs to them and they get excited. They say, great, what do you need from us? And that's not the case everywhere where you have newly elected progressive prosecutors. There's oftentimes a lot of pushback from the bench. And we have a very forward-thinking bench here in Washtenaw County. They admit, you guys are doing a lot of stuff and it's new, but we're learning with you. You're bringing us on board and we can see that this is the way of the future. So we might as well get on board while we have you all to hold our hands and to bring us on board. And again, we could not be more appreciative and thankful for that. Our law enforcement partners, look, transparently, not everybody in law enforcement likes our policies, but we are fortunate enough that we have relationships that we are continuing to pour into and build, and we can have tough conversations where we say we respectfully disagree, but we acknowledge that you see the work differently as law enforcement on the ground than we do as prosecutors who represent the people and are pursuing justice in a different manner than you see justice. And at the end of the day, we don't have law enforcement officers trying to get together and undermine us, bring lawsuits. We don't have our staff suing us. And these are issues that other progressive prosecutors have across the country.
Wow.
So, it takes time, and you have to be familiar with finessing, the art of finessing, right? You cannot come into a new space, a new office with new ideas and new ways of thinking and say, okay, now do everything as I say it should be done. People will immediately reject that. You have to have buy-in from the community at large, from your stakeholders, your partners, and people on the ground who are impacted daily by the policies. And once you have all of that, which it takes time, it does not happen in a day. We had several working groups, many of which are still meeting, that are comprised of members in the community, subject matter experts, our partners throughout the community and stakeholders within the criminal legal system. Everyone comes to the table and they offer their opinion and their expertise on our vision and how we want to implement them, those ideas, and they guide us, right? And you can't ask for anything more. So when you do it correctly, and you do it slowly with everyone sitting at the table, making sure their voices are heard, you're less likely to get resistance and opposition. And thankfully, Ellie is certainly wise enough to know that, and that's exactly how we've been moving.
Great, thank you. And I think that's something you said segues into the question in the chat. Is the prosecutor's office informed by the police of arrests that they make that are not brought to the prosecutor's office for a warrant? And I'm just reading it verbatim, but Michael, you posed that question. I don't know did you need more information to answer?
Well, just quickly, it's shocking, it's a really surprising statistic. got once, which is quite a while ago, from Detroit Police Department, was that nearly half of the arrests and booking that they made for armed robbery never resulted in a warrant request to the prosecutor's office. So you had half the people who were arrested, booked, maybe held overnight in a police station, who were never reviewed by the police. Did the screening there, and the prosecutor's office never found out that people were being arrested and potentially, as I say, held 1 or 2 nights in the police department. I'm wondering if in Washtenaw County, is the prosecutor aware of that screening that's going on within the police agencies?
So the short answer is systemically no. The only way that we're aware of something is, of course, if a warrant request is sought from our office. That said, I can say pretty confidently that that's not happening in Washtenaw County. The reason for that is because we know who's in the jail. This was one of the things that the first thing that Victoria and I did once we took office is drilling down and seeing who's in the jail, who's staying there overnight. And we know what the jail population is. And of course, it fluctuates from time to time. But our jail population is at around 50% capacity right now, which is, or maybe even less, which is as a result of appropriate measures that have been taken, in response to the COVID pandemic, as well as some of our new policies and changes in the law. It would shock me if you were seeing somebody arrested for something like an armed robbery, at least habitually, right? That a warrant request wasn't sought on that. Victoria, I don't know if you've got anything to add on that, but.
Yeah, for crimes like that, a lot of the police agencies, when they type up a report, we have shared systems, and the moment that report goes into the system, it's automatically kicked to us for a warrant request. And, law enforcement officers, they take their job very seriously. And I don't see them here in Washtenaw County coming into contact with someone who's committing a serious offense and not sending it to our office because they want, those matters to be prosecuted. Their entire, their objective is, to get people who are harming our communities out of the community. And the way that they do that is by sending it to us so that we will prosecute. Now, I want to be clear that that is not always what happens, because as you can probably glean from our conversation today, we don't always believe that it is in the best interest to just snatch people out of the community. We certainly aim to hold people accountable. And so that does go back to a shared objective that we do have with law enforcement of, if someone is committing a crime, an alleged crime, or allegedly committing a crime, they're going to want us to know about that so that we can take the appropriate steps on our end as the prosecutor's office to further that.
Thank you. I want to switch gears just a little bit. I know that one of the initiatives that's on the table, we're still working through it. And I say we, I know your office is, the DRC is at the table along with other stakeholders and community members around restorative justice. And as you all know, I think most people on screen knows that the DRC sees this work more than just a program. It's rooted in the values and philosophies of Indigenous people. It can be used for a lot of things. So it has been just an absolute delight for me personally, having a career in alternative dispute resolution. I have found it to be a delight and a joy to be able to talk about this work within the criminal justice system for what it really is, touching on those values and philosophies of harm, uplifting the person who has been harmed or the survivor, if you will, and also holding folks accountable for the harm that they've caused. And I just wanted, for you, Victoria, if you could just talk about, if you're able to talk about just the ideology that you have as you're building this out for your office. I I know that you're leaning into the work of Danielle Savit, Director of Common Justice. She's also written a book called Until We Reckon. So anything that you can share about your ideology, the framework that you're pulling together, as this is going to be, I think, a very high-profile initiative in the community as well.
I do as well, Belinda. So, you know, when you talk about the traditional criminal legal system, Ellie touched on this a bit earlier. You have someone who's been harmed and someone who has harmed them. That person who's harmed them is immediately given an attorney to represent them in their interest and protect their rights. And a part of that is, you know, not saying too much, trying to be tight-lipped, working out a plea agreement with the prosecutor's office, doing sentencing mitigation in a way that will allow the judge to see the defendant for who they are and not for necessarily just what they've done. But in that process, there's never an opportunity for a defendant to say, I caused harm, and here's why I did that. You know, at sentencing, a defendant is allowed to do what's called an allocution, but it's very guarded oftentimes because, again, the defense attorney is advising their client to not say too much. And so it really limits the defendant in being able to dig deeply. And they don't have anyone oftentimes sitting with them and working with them to do that, help them do that digging, to get to the root cause of why they committed the harm. What happened to you that, you know, may have been 10, 15, 20 years ago that just went unaddressed and has festered and has caused, you know, years of trauma that you've never worked through. And that trauma has just, you know, just continued to build in a layered fashion, and you've continued to act out as a result of that trauma. None of that happens. Also, what you miss in the traditional criminal legal system, victims, and I use that word because that is, you know, the word that is found in our statutes, even though we're not a fan of it. But victims that we also like to refer to as survivors, crime survivors, they are given an opportunity to give a victim impact statement at sentencing. But oftentimes they don't. Oftentimes, you know, decisions have already been made, and it can be seen as performative. And what victims by and large say when they exit the process of the traditional criminal legal system is that they didn't feel like they got anything. That even if the person who harmed them was sentenced to jail or prison, it didn't really repair them in a way that they thought that they would have been. It didn't satisfy them. I've even heard from crime victims that when someone who harmed them was sent off to prison at the Michigan Department of Corrections, they would routinely check the website for the release date because they knew that person was coming home, and they feared what that person might do once they came back into the community because they knew that there was no such thing as rehabilitation in jails and prisons. And when I used to have these conversations with people who were survivors, I would ask, and other folks have asked, and research has been done, what would you have needed in that process? And the answer was very simple. I needed acknowledgement of the harm that they caused me or my family. I wanted an opportunity to ask questions such as, why did you do this? Why did you choose me to do this? What in you caused you to go down this road? And more importantly, what do you need so that you don't continue down this path to hurt me again or to hurt someone else? And so this idea of restorative justice that, again, Belinda pointed out, it goes all the way back to indigenous cultures and African cultures as well. The idea is born from, you know, people in communities and villages believe that there were no such thing as bad people. good people had bad things happen to them that if they went unaddressed, they then turned around to do bad things. And that it was up to the village, the people in the community, oftentimes the elders, to come together, to wrap their arms around that person and to do, what we now are calling healing circles. And they've been called several different things over the years in different practices. But essentially it's an opportunity to have the person who was harmed sit in a circle with the person that caused the harm and to have those conversations multiple times in a layered fashion to really unpack the layers of trauma that have led up to that moment. And it's the best thing for a person who has been a survivor of crime, the best thing to disrupt that cycle for the person who caused the harm, and it's ultimately the best thing for the community. Because if you really want to talk about reimagining community safety, that's how you do it. You invest in people. You get to the root cause of why they did what they did so that they don't do it again. And it is that simple. The process does not, look to pulling people out of the community and putting them in timeout. Yes, that has to happen, unfortunately, but that should not be the go-to. And, the studies and research have shown when you keep people in their communities with their family and their village, they are most likely to be successful with you pouring into them there, with you sitting them down and having them co-create a plan of accountability with the person who they harmed, right? Giving them ownership of that. That's really when you will see a lot of growth through painful, shedding of experiences and trauma, and ultimately healing. Because when people are healed, that's when they turn away from those behaviors and those practices that we consider to be harmful to our community. And we know jails and prisons simply do not harm, they don't heal people. They further harm people. And that's the basic idea behind restorative justice. Now, if you want me to go into our program that we're building out, Belinda, I can a little bit, but I want to save some for when we get ready to roll this out. But I'm certainly happy to kind of go over some of that framework that we've been working on together.
Only if you feel prepared to, and this group will hold you to it, so don't speak too fast.
Well, I'll just say very surface level that we are building out a restorative justice program in partnership with the DRC that will involve these facilitative healing circles for an 18-month period of time. And we are partnering with the DRC because they have the trained facilitators and are continuing to train facilitators to do this work. And it is victim-centered. So we are not asking folks, to sit in a circle if they're not prepared to do that. And it will also be done at the beginning of a case if we are looking to divert folks out. And if we have to bring charges because, a week or two has gone by before a victim says they're ready for restorative justice, then it will then turn into a diversion model. And so we have studied deflection models and diversion models with both common justice and impact justice. And this work it's working elsewhere throughout the country. And it's going to work here. We're going to be very careful and calculated and thoughtful with the way that we roll this out, which is why we didn't roll it out in the first 3 months. It is coming this summer. Our victim advocates in our office, they have all been provided a copy of Danielle Surratt's book, Until We Reckon. They are reading it. Their training starts next week. And it's a 2-part training that we're doing with the DRC. And, when we kick this off, we want, the community to understand what it is and to get involved because that really is how we reimagine community safety, going this alternative route.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And there's a question in the chat from Greta. What matrix will you use to measure success? Greta, are you talking about any one specific thing or just generally? She must be on my second screen. Greta, are you here?
I am here. So I was just typing up some more. what metrics have been used and how can you use them to measure how your system is working?
Sure. So, the truth of the matter is that what metrics have been used, there really aren't it. And this is not just something that comes out of the prosecutor's office here. Quite frankly, this is something that the criminal justice system as a whole has been rather poor at doing. You handle things case by case. You don't look at the long-term outcomes. There's very few, surveys or partnerships with researchers or quantitative data that has looked like. And we're in the process of changing that, because I do believe that you need to measure what you want to achieve, and we're not perfect, and if something's not working, we want to be able to change direction. So I'll talk about a few things, and it's around a whole host of initiatives. But one of the major things that we need to make sure that we're doing in the justice system is not treating people differently because of who they are. And this is something that has been the topic of a lot of conversation in our community recently. The Citizens for Racial Equity in Washtenaw came out with a report that indicated that Black people were between 3 and 29 times more likely to be charged with certain types of felonies than were white people. And that at a surface level is totally unacceptable. So what we did is consistent with the recommendations by CREW. We've partnered, and it's a first of its kind partnership with the American Civil Liberties Union and the University of Michigan Law School on the Prosecutor Transparency Project. And what that is going to do is we're going to go through each and every decision point that the prosecutor's office is involved in, from charging to plea bargaining to sentencing and the like, and determining where in the system we are seeing white people being treated differently than people of color. And when those disparities arise, we are going to take action to eliminate them, but we're also going to be tracking this long term. It's going to be a quite robust study. We've got, one of the things that we just have here in our backyard, and we're fortunate, is we've got some of the leading criminal justice empirical researchers in the entire country at the University of Michigan Law School. And J.J. Prescott, who is just world renowned for his research, is actually leading this program. So that's going to be one aspect. Another thing that same initiative is going to be building out is a transparent data dashboard. So you can see things like the success rate of certain diversion and deflection programs, right? We've got various programs that rely on somebody not coming back into the system, and so we're going to be tracking how good is this intervention? Where does it work? We're going to be looking at things, tracking things like overcharging, right? How frequently do we bring a charge, but then end up quickly just reducing it down, which is an indicator perhaps that those charges were brought, to gain leverage, which to my mind is unacceptable. We should be charging fairly and starting from there. The other thing that we're doing is the quantitative analysis is really important, but we're also engaged in several partnerships around qualitative data. And one thing that we've been working with our partners in the domestic violence survivor community on is a study in coordination, again, with the University of Michigan School of Social Work, to really identify how we are treating survivors of domestic violence in the system. What is their satisfaction rate? What could we be doing to facilitate more reporting? How, in particular, are we doing with Black and Indigenous people of color communities and survivors in those communities? Subsets of survivors like military veterans who often have a trauma-informed response and are treated differently by the justice system because of what they do as a result of their training in that moment. It's something that we're all really interested in drilling down into, and we're going to take the results of that and potentially modify our practice. So we've got a number of ways of doing this, both quantitative and qualitative. On the quantitative side, I'm really looking forward to, and this will be it's probably about a year away, because data is messy, but we're going to be transparent with all of this and have a transparent data dashboard so you can see how we're doing on equity measures, so you can see how we're doing in terms of our rehabilitative programs. we believe in being transparent with everybody, and I think that voters should expect nothing less. So everything that we're doing is going to be measurable and available online.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions? We have about 15 minutes, a little more. And I don't see any hands or anything in the chat, I don't think. Okay.
There's one more question in the chat.
Where did I missed a question,
Oh, here,
Sally?
yes. It just came directly to me. Would Healing Circle's method be an alternative for most serious felonies?
So the parameters that we're going to put on this are we are not going to just limit restorative justice to the most minor crime. This is something that quite frankly you often see done, and restorative justice is reserved for things that maybe don't even warrant criminal charges in the first place, in my view. So we're not going to limit it. That said, there are a couple of exceptions. One is because it's always going to be at the survivor of a crime's choice. We are initially excluding from restorative justice diversion and deflection domestic violence cases, cases that involve sexual assault, cases that involve potential coercion by the defendant, or the would-be defendant against the survivor. And that's because if we're going to have this be a survivor-led effort, we need to make sure that the survivor is making that choice voluntarily and free of coercion. And those are situations in which we know coercion is often present. Then, I'll say that there are certain really serious categories of crimes where it's likely that, we're going to make the determination that, for public safety reasons, this is somebody, the defendant is somebody that does need to be separated from the community. You murder somebody. I am a supporter of layering restorative justice on top of that, but if you've murdered somebody, I think we have an obligation to protect the safety of the community, and to my mind, you do need to be separated from the community for a time. But with that said, absent a public safety risk, which of course is going to be informed by the circumstances of the crime, or absent a crime like the ones that I mentioned that we know have really levels of coercive control, everything is going to be eligible for restorative justice. We're not limiting this to misdemeanors. We're not limiting it to low-level stuff. If the survivor wants it, and we can do it consistent with public safety, we're going to try it. And I'm really excited for this because, look, standing for survivors means listening to them. And there's no reason, unless it's a real imminent public safety risk, not to provide this option if it's something the survivor needs to be made whole.
Thank you, Ellie. Anything else, Sally, in your chat? You're muted. I can't hear you.
Not in mine.
Okay. All right. So I will, my last question is, what do you need from the community? You have 30 plus people on the screen, very active folks in the Washtenaw County community, in a lot of different spaces, not just with the DRC. Is there anything that you need from us?
Very supportive of you and what you're doing.
And very supportive of you, what you're doing. So what can we do to support you in moving forward?
Well, continue supporting us and how I can break that down for you. So one, I got to continue to plug our restorative justice partnership with the DRC. If you would like to volunteer and be trained up as a facilitator, the training is free. They have received a generous donation to provide this very expensive quality training for free to people in our community who want to be involved in helping folks, in healing circles. And that is one way. Another way, if you are a part of other organizations, community groups, your church, reach out. Ellie and I, we live for the community that we serve. we absolutely hate that we are handicapped by this pandemic and we can't get outside of these screens and interact physically in person. And so if your groups are meeting online, virtually, via Zoom or what have you, we would love to come and, share our vision, answer any other questions that folks in the community may have. We don't want folks to, for the next several years, continue on the way that they have, not really knowing and understanding what the prosecutor does, because we aim to be, like Eli said, very transparent. Everything that we have done and issued in a policy, it is on display for the world to see, and we will continue in that vein. So if you can help us help you in that way, that would be truly appreciated.
Thank you. Ellie, did you want to add? And there is one more question in the chat that I won't miss it, Craig.
No. I think Victoria is exactly right on that. I mean, please, if you're interested in being a facilitator, please go through that training. Please encourage others to do it. One thing, and I'll say in particular, one thing that and I'm not speaking out of turn. I know Belinda and Jermaine, because we talked about this, but one thing that we really could use is more people of color, more folks from the communities that are often most impacted in the criminal legal system, trained as facilitators. I'll say in particular, Black men as facilitators is really important. And so if you're connected with folks, I think folks would be good facilitators. Please spread the word on that, and we're happy to talk to anybody. And then just invite us places. We love having these conversations. We love having the conversations about what we're doing. And we'll show up, I promise. Virtually at first, and I really can't wait till we can actually get back to seeing each other in person.
Yeah, that will be great. And I'm just going to add a footnote to the training. We are being very intentional about drawing in, recruiting people for the training who are from the BIPOC community, Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. So please share our website. You can direct them to speak to me, Jermaine. And I do envision having this training multiple times because we've gotten such great support around the training, around this initiative and full restorative justice. We're able to offer the training for free right now. We're doing it the spring, later this month. We'll do another one in the fall, or maybe early fall. And I see this happening again once or twice next year. We really want to have a good, solid pool of volunteers. And as Victoria mentioned, the cases will be open longer. So working with the case will be more time intensive. So we need to have enough, build our capacity to make sure we have people who are a part of that. So I just wanted to add that as a footnote for those who might be interested or know someone who's interested in it. A couple more questions came up in the chat. Craig is asking that he thinks he heard you say or mention using county millage funds to help with the lead deflection to community mental health resources. Is that for both offenders and survivors? Are there enough CMH resources to successfully deal with all that?
So it's a great question, and I'll say a couple things. A lot of the direct service provision is going to be funded by millage funds. We were lucky enough actually to get a grant for the positions both in our office and the sheriff's office that is funding those for at least the time being, and it's renewable every year, and so will hopefully get us started, and after the grant runs out, there's got to be a conversation about how we make them permanent, but that gives us more resources to not be spending on personnel, but rather to be spending on the services. In terms of if it's just for defendants or survivors, this is one of the things that we've been talking about in our LEAD meetings. And LEAD was a program that actually started in Kings County, Washington, where Seattle is. And it's geared towards, if you would otherwise arrest somebody for a low-level offense, possession of drugs, misdemeanor crimes that may be related to substance use or behavioral health issues, that instead of bringing those charges, you'll get them access to help and to treatment. Well, what you actually saw in Kings County is once word about this program spread, people were coming up to officers with like a little bit of drugs and saying, "Can you please arrest me for this?" Or not arrest me, but look, I'm committing a crime. Put me in the lead program, which is not something. Yeah, which is not something that you really want to incentivize, right? You don't want people just committing crimes, low-level crimes, just so they can get access to resources. So one of the things that we've actually been talking about here is not just limiting it to folks that come on law enforcement's radar with respect to a would-be arrest, but also for we call them social service referrals. If somebody is otherwise dealing with a substance use, behavioral health, mental health issue, that they can just be referred. And this is particularly true in light of some of our policies. For example, we're not charging certain drug offenses, marijuana, entheogenic plants, Suboxone. We're not charging sex workers. But for those folks are often precisely those who might benefit from a lead type program. And so what we're talking about in these groups is, yes, let's make a pathway to a social service referral so you don't have to be arrested to get access to these resources. If you're ready for it, you shouldn't have to like procure some cocaine and go to an officer with them, right? What sense does that make? So it's something that we're thinking about. In terms of whether the resources are going to be there long term, it's there until it runs out is the short answer, and we don't know how much the demand for this program is going to be. What I will say is that we've got a county and a county board of commissioners that is really committed to this model and is committed to doing things differently with respect to provision of behavioral health, mental health, substance use issues. So if we've come up to a point where there's just a flood of demand and so many people are successfully going through this program, getting connected to resources, and then going, and then, and the expensive part is if they continue through it, right? That means that this is a success. And by the way, that means that we're probably saving money on the back end because we don't have probation costs. We don't have the cost of sending somebody to jail. So I'm hopeful, frankly, that we run into a point where we're just like, wow, this is going gangbusters. We're getting so many people help, and they're continuing in it, which is what's driving the expense. Because I'm confident we can then have a talk with external funders, with our county commission, with whomever about making sure that the resources stay there to meet the success of the program. But like everything, we will see how it goes, and we'll go from there.
A couple more questions have popped up. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. You've talked about that a couple times, and a question is, what is the percentage of APAs in your office who are people of color?
Victoria, you want to count that?
Yeah, let's.
I'm trying to.
Out of, I can give you an exact number. I don't want to try to do math too fast and do it incorrectly. So out of roughly about 30 APAs, I would think that we have 1, 2, 3, 4. I would say we have about 5.
6. I counted 6.
Okay.
6.
Did you count me?
I did, yes.
Okay, I didn't count me, so there you go, 6.
6. So it's 6, and then I'll also say this: our entire leadership team, and I'm a white guy, obviously, but our entire leadership team, which is Victoria and all of our first assistant APAs, is 100% women and people of color. So.
Great, thank you. I'm not sure, is it routinely offered to survivors at this point? Is that in relation to the LEAD program?
Right, what Ellie was just answering.
Okay.
It hasn't started yet. We're aiming to make our first referrals in May and probably by the end of May. So we're just hiring for the positions now. Our lead prosecutor is starting at the end of April, and then the sheriff needs a program coordinator. So we're getting it off the ground, and so we'll start seeing the first referrals according to the current timeline in May.
Great. So Jermaine has put a link about the training in the chat. So if you want to click on that and learn more about that. And we'll wrap up with this question. What surprised you when you actually walked into your office door? What was the most surprising thing? Who wants to go first?
I'll go. I'll take a
Okay.
stab at this one. So I'll say that I was pleasantly surprised to see how warm everyone in this office was and how ready they were for the changes that we were bringing. They just wanted to understand. They wanted to do what we were asking in the way that we were asking it. They wanted to get it right. But they were ready for it. And that's not just our APAs, but also our victim advocates. And I wasn't expecting it because, again, if you get in this bubble of progressive prosecutors across the country and you listen to their war stories, that was not their experience. They literally, like I said, some of them had their own staff suing them. So I was just pleasantly surprised with that. And then secondary, I was also very surprised to come into Washtenaw County and see that the groundwork had already been laid by several organizations and folks on the ground, along with folks in office. So, you know, the vision that Eli had, it was not very foreign to people. We just needed the right person in the hot seat in the prosecutor's office that would kind of drive all of this forward.
Thank you. Eli?
I was literally going to say the same thing. Which is why Victoria probably knew that, which is why she wanted to go first. But I'll say something a little bit different. Being a prosecutor is not a job where people love you very much, right? Because the truth of the matter is, no matter what's happening in the criminal legal system and the aspect of it that you oversee, nobody wants to be there. Defendants don't want to be there. Victims don't want to be there. Even witnesses don't want to be there. Nobody wants to be in the criminal legal system because it means something bad has happened and something bad is about to happen to somebody else. So I steeled myself for that, and I steeled myself for you know, the fact that, okay, I ran for office, and you know, when you're running for office, people like you, and now I'm going to take office, and it's not going to be the same. When we rolled out our first sort of flurry of policies that we spent months working on with our working groups, and we rolled them out, I was incredibly surprised to get handwritten cards in the mail from people saying, you know, I've never wrote to a prosecutor before, but I just want to say thank you because I feel my humanity has been recognized. I got cards from people saying I have loved ones in the system, and I'm not asking you to do anything about it, but I wish you were a prosecutor 20 years ago, and thank you for recognizing the city of my. And we got phone calls too from people from sort of all walks of life, people that had been subject to racial profiling and agreed with our policy on racial profiling and talked about the dignitary harm that it caused them. You know, I on the sex work policy, I spoke to one person who said my mother was a sex worker for years. She ended up in and out of the system, and I just wish that somebody had recognized that she was a person and had not just sought to charge her, but instead to recognize her humanity. It would have changed the course of her entire life. I didn't expect any of that. Really, I didn't. I just thought we were going to get, you know, a lot of hate because of the position that we have in the prosecutor's office, and that kind of stuff keeps us going. And I think it's reflective of this broader need to really be listening and be responsive to the communities we serve, and to recognize the fundamental humanity in everybody, whether they're a victim, whether they're a defendant, whether they're a witness. These are human beings first. Nobody is defined by the worst thing that they have done in their life. Nobody should be defined by the worst thing that they've done in their life. Nobody should be defined by the worst thing that has happened to them in their life. So I didn't expect that, but it was, of course, a very pleasant surprise.
Well, on that note, Ellie, that is so wonderful to hear that people are reaching out to you in such positive ways. I was just thinking, who would have thought in June of 2019 on a walk, a unity walk, I would meet this young man talking about being prosecutor, and we will be here today. That's when I first met Ellie. Thank you both for being here, being a part of this monthly event that we have with our volunteers and community partners and supporters. I really appreciate all the work that you do, have done in such a short period of time. I wish, virtual hug, hopefully soon in person, I'll be able to give you both a hug. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for not just the work that you're doing, for inviting the DRC to the table. That's not always easy for small community nonprofits to be at these tables. So I appreciate and respect and honor that invitation to be there and to be in partnership with all of you. So this will conclude today's April's Brown Bag. And Sally, I'm going to turn it over to you in case you have other announcements.
Okay, I just wanted to say that we don't have a subject for May's Brown Bag because May's Brown Bag was going to be a check-in and we've already done that. So if you have a speaker you'd like to recommend, that would be great. And otherwise, we'll see you in June, where some people from Maryland are going to talk about the work that they do in alternative dispute resolution. And so we're delighted to see how that goes. And Ellie and Victoria, it's just delightful to hear from you. I'm sorry that you expect only negatives, but a real positive from all of us. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.